Hey everyone, I'm Army Gaming, welcome back to my channel and welcome to Monster Analysis. Up for analysis today is The Undertaker. Another day at the graveyard, another hole to dig, another body to bury. The job can get boring, so when The Undertaker doesn't feel like digging, he pulls a little trick out of his sleeve. If no one's dead, there's no need to work. And so this is the newest and latest Dark Legendary monster. He's the Hell-O-Ween Team Race monster in Monster Legends. And as of the time recording this video, there's a total of 43 Dark Legendary monsters. That's quite a bit, so he has a lot of competition there. And aside from that, he's also in the Undead book, which currently hosts 23 legendary monsters, and he's also in the Evil Legions book, which has 55 legendary monsters, and lastly he's in the Underworld book, which has 36 legendary monsters, so he has quite a bit of competition in each of the books and in his own element. And with that said, let's jump into his stats. He has a power of 3,388, which actually puts him in 21st place for Dark Legendary monsters. This puts him tied with Nishan's Pet and the Ringer, so not a very high power. As for his life, however, he boasts an impressive 34,683, which actually puts him in 4th place. And actually the only 3 Dark Legendary monsters that have a higher life than him are the Nemesis monsters, Samael, the Plague Carrier, the Fever Scatterer, and the Disease Spreader. So that's not really fair, right? If it wasn't for the Nemesis monsters, he would have the highest life of all the Dark Legendary monsters, so he's incredibly tanky. And then, as is the case with really tanky monsters, they tend to be pretty slow. He has a speed of 3,399, which puts him in 30th place, tied with monsters like Count Vlad and Akhenotep. So not a very high power, not a very high speed, but he is very tanky. And then one very interesting thing about this Team Race monster is his trait, Gravedigger. It's a brand new trait specifically for him. He's immune to all kinds of possession and nightmares. Immune to all kinds of possession is important because there are 2 monsters currently in the game that have a different kind of possession. Hackster can hack you, and Glitch can corrupt you, and both of these possessions can bypass immunity to possession, so it's really great to have a monster that is finally immune to that, especially with the recent change to possession, where you can no longer select your move or just recharge. Now when you're possessed, it's essentially AI controlled, so you have no idea what's going to happen, and so this is certainly a very great trait to have. And with that said, we're going to be jumping into the skills, but before that, I do have to say this monster is quite an anomaly. I'm still not really sure what to do with him. Originally my plan was to make him an attacker, specifically because of the Gravedigger trait, because he can't be hacked. I thought he would be perfect for PvP, but then once you look at his skills, you really come to think about it, and he's not really much of an attacker. He's also not a deny monster. He's more of the supportive side, the supportive tank side, but even that he doesn't do too well. I don't know, I'll analyze it, I'll give you guys my thoughts, and then we can decide together what's the best thing for this monster. I think I have an idea of what I do want to do with him, but at the same time I'm not completely sure, so I do want to preface by saying that. And great, now that that's out of the way, his ultimate attack is Last Ride. Deals very heavy special damage to all enemies, applies bleeding to all enemies, heals itself by 100%, restores cooldowns on itself. So this skill does a lot. It's a special base 60 damage AoE that is quite powerful. It also applies bleeding, which reduces the enemy's HP by 15% for the next 3 turns, and also reduces their power output by 20%. And aside from that, this skill will heal the Undertaker's life all the way to 100% back to full life, and it restores any cooldowns. And so this is a little odd. It kind of feels like they just threw it in there like, you know what, let's also restore his cooldowns. And so overall, it's just a pretty interesting monster. Considering the Undertaker is more of a tanky monster, it's great that it heals his life all the way to 100%. I would have preferred that this skill could have also immobilized, maybe an AoE stun and AoE possession, just something to also prevent the enemy from attacking you. Considering you probably won't be running strengthens on him, it's not going to be doing too much damage, especially with his low power. But overall, I love that it does heal him, and I guess the bleeding is nice. That does reduce the enemy's damage output. So it's a strange skill. It's an alright ultimate attack. And in skills group 1, I only really quickly want to talk about Brothers of Destruction. Applies nightmares to all enemies, requires cooldown. It's an AoE dark based attack that costs 16 stamina with a 2-turn cooldown. And the reason I want to talk about it is because of nightmares. Normally nightmares is only supposed to take away 5% of the enemy's HP, but according to the wiki, it's 15%. So I don't know if this is actually the case. I don't know if maybe it's just a bug or if it's going to be changed. Soldier Boy has been doing a lot of weird things where one monster will have Sunburn that takes away 15%, another monster will have Sunburn that only takes away 10%, or Bleeding as opposed to being 10%, it'll be 15%. So I don't know if they're going to eventually just stabilize everything and make everything, or I should say standardize everything, or if they're just giving some monsters some special treatment. And if the Undertaker is a monster with special treatment, it is pretty darn cool that he has a Nightmares that takes away 15% of the enemy's HP for the next 4 turns, for a grand total of 60%. So maybe it is something unique to the Undertaker. And if that's the case, you may want to consider Brothers of Destruction, specifically because you won't be running Strengthens on the Undertaker, so there really isn't much of a need to give him power skills. Instead, you just want to give him DOT skills. That way he can apply damage over time on the enemy monsters. That's a really good way to go about supportive monsters. Now another reason why you might want to consider this skill from skills group 1 is because, and I recently found this out thanks to Discord, thanks to my friends on there, that if a skill has no damage, if it's 0 damage here, even though the accuracy says 90, it's a 100% chance to land the effect. So if you always do Brothers of Destruction against any monster that isn't hardened, isn't bulwark, isn't tough, the Nightmares is always going to land. So that's pretty darn cool. I didn't know that up until just recently. And so since you're only going after effects, it's pretty cool. You have 100% accuracy Nightmares that take away 15% of the enemy's HP for the next 4 turns. So that's one reason you may want to consider this from skills group 1. He does have a slightly better version skills group 2, where it also applies daze, but then you do have that 90% accuracy, because then the attack needs to land and then the effect may land. So that's just something you may want to consider. And so on to skills group 2 we go. Old school. Deals heavy dark damage to one enemy, 50% chance of applying stun to one enemy, so 55 damage, dark based attack, 29 stamina costs, no cooldown, so it's spammable, and you have a 50% chance to stun. Personally, I don't really see much of a reason to run this skill. First of all, it's not even that strong, it's dark based, and although it is spammable, 50% chance to stun, if you want a chance to immobilize the enemy monster, you may as well go with a 100% chance to stun, which he does have in skills group 3. So in my personal opinion, there's no need to run old school. Now before I actually go any further, I do want to mention to everyone, this is of course my opinion. If you do want to run the Undertaker as an attacker, and you do want to give him a couple strength runes, and you do want to have a spammable 55 damage skill that may stun, then by all means go for it. More power to you. You do not have to listen to what I'm saying. This is just my analysis, what I think is best for the Undertaker. And as I said earlier at the beginning, I'm still not even entirely sure what to do with him. Alright, and next we have Rip. Rest in peace. Applies immunity to stun to itself, applies double damage to itself, heals itself by 30%, requires cooldown. So we have a self skill that costs 18 stamina, has a 2 turn cooldown, you get immunity to stun for 3 turns, you heal yourself by 30%, and you get double damage for the next turn. And I actually do like this skill quite a bit just because it has a 2 turn cooldown with an immunity to stun that lasts for 3 turns, which means throughout the whole duration of the game, you could essentially be immune to stun. You would never have to worry about being stunned, or you would never have to worry about being possessed by any kind of possession, so that's pretty cool. That would mean the only kind of deny you'd have to worry about, or the main kind of deny you'd have to worry about, would be freeze. And so in my opinion, if you're going for a supportive Undertaker, you should definitely be running this. There are plenty of dark monsters that can stun you, so immunity to stun, it's just a really good way to protect against them. For example, Mommy can possess you or stun you, so if you do run immunity to stun and you are able to use this before Mommy goes, well then you're safe. You can't be possessed by her and you can't be stunned by her. Not to mention you also heal by 30%, which may not seem significant, but considering you have a high life, considering you can put team life or life runes on this monster, it can really be really significant. And you also give yourself double damage, which I don't know how significant that may be. It sucks that it only lasts for 1 turn. Maybe if it lasted for 2 or 3 turns that would have been awesome, because he can pack quite a punch with the next attack, or the next 2 attacks I'm going to talk about. So it sucks that it lasts for 1 turn, but hey, it's still a nice little buff he may potentially utilize. And then next up we have Choke Slam. Deals moderate dark damage to all enemies, applies daze to all enemies, applies nightmares to all enemies, requires cooldown. So 40 damage dark based AoE, 27 stamina cost, 2 turn cooldown, daze reduces the enemy's accuracy by 25% and reduces damage output by 25%. And then we have nightmares once again, minus 10% of their stamina for the first turn, and then minus 15% life for the next 4 turns. Again, I don't know if Nightmares is actually supposed to be 15 or just if it's supposed to be 5. I don't know what Social Point is doing, but let's just assume it is 15%. This is a great skill. Not only does it apply a DOT, it also dazes, so reduces the enemy's damage output, reduces their accuracy. I think this is a really great skill to have on this monster, especially if you're not running any strength runes on him. And once again, you have to decide, do you want to run Choke Slam for that added chance to daze, even though it's a 90% accuracy, or do you want to run Brothers of Destruction where it's just a 100% chance of landing Nightmares? The choice is totally up to you. I think personally I would recommend Choke Slam. And with that said, we can finally move on to skills group 3. The Tombstone deals massive dark damage to one enemy, applies stun to one enemy, requires cooldown. 65 damage, 29 stamina, 2 turn cooldown, 65 dark based damage I should have said, and it applies stun to one enemy. So this is a guaranteed stun. Way better than the other skill that's spammable and you may stun, you 50% chance to stun. I don't like that chance. If you're gonna immobilize, I like a guaranteed chance to immobilize, assuming the attack lands. And a skill like the Tombstone and even Choke Slam, they combo really great with Rest in Peace, considering you give yourself double damage, so that's just something to think about. So in my opinion, Tombstone is one skill you should definitely consider running. Next up we have Ministry of Darkness, removes all negative status effects from itself, heals itself by 50%, requires cooldown. So we have another self skill, 15 stamina cost, 3 turn cooldown. You remove all negative effects on yourself and you heal by 50%. What a great skill. I absolutely love this skill. Not only do you heal by half your life, you also remove any negative effects. One of the best ways to take out tanks is just to apply a DOT on them, a damage over time skill, because DOTs take away a certain percentage of your life. So it doesn't matter if you have 100k life, a million life, 10% is still 10%, 15% is still 15%. so this skill completely gets rid of negative effects. And I mainly focus on DLTs, but obviously this gets rid of all negative effects, whether you're blinded, whether you're dazed, whatever. And of course you also heal by 50% half your life. If you have no life runes, you're healing by over 17k life, so that is just fantastic. And again, 15 stamina cost, even Rest in Peace, 18 stamina cost. Yeah, Rest in Peace may have a 2-turn cooldown, and Ministry of Darkness a 3-turn cooldown, but depending how long the game is, depending what kind of opponents you're facing, these are skills you could definitely utilize more than once. And so I would definitely recommend Ministry of Darkness on a supportive tank build. And then last but not least, we have what is potentially Undertaker's best skill, Dead Man Walks. Resurrects one ally with 50% life, requires cooldown, 18 stamina cost, 3-turn cooldown, and as I already mentioned, it resurrects an ally with 50% of their life. Now of course this would have been better if it was 100% of their life, because 50% of their life they're vulnerable to getting knocked out in one hit again, but hey, it's still awesome that you have a resurrection skill with only a 3-turn cooldown. So once again, depending on how long the battle is, this is a skill you could potentially use more than once. And so because of Dead Man Walk specifically, I feel that the Undertaker's main purpose is just to stay alive as long as possible, to just be able to revive an ally if you need to. I feel like that's his main purpose. He doesn't really do anything else that well. Yeah, you can run some strength runes, yeah you can use the tombstone, yeah you can use chokeslam, but there are better attackers in the dark category even in the books. There's just monsters that do it way better if you're going for an offensive monster. But when you look at his skills, then he has a skill that can recover his life by 30%, a skill that can recover his life by 50%, and then he has Dead Man Walks that can resurrect an ally. I really do think that is his main purpose. Just keep the Undertaker alive long enough that if one of your allies does die, hey, it doesn't matter, you can bring him back. So because of that, I think my recommended skills for this monster would be Dead Man Walks, Ministry of Darkness, and Rest in Peace. As for the fourth and final skill, that's a really tough one. I'm still deciding. It's either going to be Chokeslam or the Tombstone. I do love the Tombstone because it is a stun skill and you never know when stun can come in handy. And then Chokeslam, I do love it because of the DLT being 15% and the daze. But you know what, let's just say Nightmares is actually 5% not 15%. In that case, I would definitely say the Tombstone. But if Chokeslam is 15%, then there's a huge argument for Chokeslam. So it's really going to be up to you to decide Chokeslam or the Tombstone. Again, I'm still undecided. The way I see the Undertaker for runes, you're either going to give him 3 team speed rune just to help your main deny monster go first. And if your main deny monster does go first, your attacker does the AoE or attacks a single enemy, then there's a valid reason for using Chokeslam, because obviously you don't need a heal by the first turn, you don't need to use Ministry, you don't need to use Rest in Peace, you don't need to use Dead Man Walk. So these 3 skills become useless on the very first turn, in which case the only real viable skill you have is Chokeslam, just to AoE Daze and Nightmares everyone. Or of course you can use the Tombstone if you're running the Tombstone. And also because of that reason, you could even argue that you might not even need Rest in Peace and Ministry of Darkness, instead just run one of them. And it's hard to decide which one. Remove negative effects, heal by 50%, your immunity to stun, and heal by 30%. Like I said, because you're immune to possession, having immunity to stun could definitely come in handy. But again, if you have this monster running on team speed, just to help your denier go first, your denier can deny the enemy, your attacker attacks an enemy, you don't really need the immunity to stun, in which case you would probably benefit more from Ministry of Darkness, in which case you would probably want to run Ministry of Darkness, Dead Man Walks, the Tombstone, and Chokeslam, so this is another viable skill set. But for the purpose of this video and just for what I was thinking originally, and again, like I said, I don't really know what to do with this monster, I'm still a little confused. Ministry of Darkness, Dead Man Walks, Rest in Peace, this is a really extremely supportive skill that is just focused on keeping the Undertaker alive as long as possible, just maybe even the last one alive, just to resurrect a fallen soldier and then still be able to do something, whether Chokeslam or Tombstone. So yeah, I'm so sorry if this is confusing, but the Undertaker's he's an interesting monster. As far as runes, I already mentioned you can do 3 team speed just to help your main deny monster go first, although I imagine most people don't want to do that because you really want to capitalize on his high life, in which case maybe you should run 1 life rune, a single life rune, and 2 team speed. Or instead of a single life, you can also do team life just so he helps all of your monsters out. Or you can do a combination of team life, team speed, and single life. It's really up to you. Now if you do want to run the Undertaker as an attacker, which I don't really see much of a reason to, I mean you still potentially can, right? You can give him a single speed and 2 strength, specifically for PvP because he can't be hacked, because he can't be possessed. If you do face a high ranked up 130 Hackster, and Hackster does AoE possession, or AoE hack I should say, Undertaker isn't going to be immobilized, in which case you'd be able to use the Tombstone to just like single hit the enemy attacker, and probably just wipe him out if you're running 2 high level strength runes, so that is a possibility. But just keep in mind that your base speed is pretty low. This is lower than most. This is probably going to leave the Undertaker slower than the enemy's attacker, so that may not work out completely. It's really hard to say. It depends on your league, it depends on the runes, the enemy runes, your runes. If you run team speed, maybe you can make Undertaker fast enough. There's just a lot of variability in this game. But yeah, if you do want to make him an attacker, or if you do want him to have some offensive power, you could always go the rainbow build, 1 speed, 1 strength, 1 life, or maybe instead of the speed, a team speed that'll still help out your denier and your other attacker. And that's still a viable option, especially if you go with Chokeslam and Tombstone. That way he actually has 2 attack skills, one that does 40 damage, one that does 65 damage. That's another viable option. So, I don't know, I think that's going to conclude this analysis. Now I want to hear from all of you guys. What do you guys think about the Undertaker? Do you like him? Do you not like him? Do you think he's overwhelming, underwhelming? Do you think I'm not giving him enough credit? Please, whatever you think about this monster, let me know in the comments below. More importantly, let me know how you're going to be running them, if you do have them, if you're going to have them. Let me know what skills you would use and what runes you would use. I am really curious to hear all of your guys' opinions. Also, give me some ideas of what teams you would actually use the Undertaker in. And once again, with that said, that is going to conclude this analysis. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for sharing your opinions. I'm Gaming, and like always, remember to dream big and pursue your passions.